Okay, I want to dig right into the subject by starting with an easy example. And from there on, I will see how deep I can dig into it. So, considering the concept of size, is a microbe objectively small? Is an elephant objectively big? Now, obviously, a microbe is small. It's small compared to an elephant, and an elephant is big compared to a microbe. But is a microbe small in and of itself? I want you to imagine the universe with nothing in it except a microbe. So nothing exists except a microbe in the middle of infinite space. Now, since nothing else exists, there is nothing else with which you can compare this microbe with. So there is no way to tell whether this microbe is small or big. You need at least one other object with a different size to compare it with so that you can define it as small or big. Now, size isn't the only thing that you can define when you are able to compare two objects with each other. In fact, well, I'm not sure about this, but I believe that you are only able to define something about an object when you are able to compare it with another object. So not only size, but also, for example, heat. Is an object hot or cold by itself? You can only define something as hot or cold when you can compare it with another object that has a higher or lower temperature. Another example, speed. Is an object moving fast or slow by itself? Again, you can only define it as fast or slow when you compare it with an other object that has a faster or slower speed. And so my point is that from the moment that you're able to compare an object with another different object, that's the moment when you can start to define or describe an object. So, an object by itself without the existence of other objects is indescribable and undefinable. Now, to put this into the context of relativity and absolutism, relativity means being able to compare two different things with each other. And absolutism means one thing by itself without the existence of anything else. And so this leads me again towards the idea of absolute truth. The idea that truth is absolute and that there exists only one truth. One truth that explains all of reality. You can't have multiple truths to explain a certain phenomena. There can only be one truth that can explain a phenomena perfectly. If there were multiple truths, then that phenomena would literally exist in multiple forms of manifestations simultaneously due to the multiple truths that it is governed by. But a phenomena exists only in one specific way. So truth is absolute. There is only one truth. The truth with capital T. This means that the truth cannot compare itself with another different kind of truth. See where I'm getting at? The absolute truth cannot compare itself with another absolute truth. And again, the only way to be able to describe something is when you are able to compare it with something different. But you have to realize that the absolute truth is the only thing that exists. There is nothing else but absolute truth, because that's essentially the nature of everything in reality. Reality as a whole is governed by the absolute truth, and so literally everything is essentially truth itself. So really, the absolute truth cannot compare itself with anything else, because there is nothing else. And therefore, there is no way to describe it. Every form of description is a result of relativity. Let's use another example to prove this. Let's use logic. Now, this is an interesting one. Can something be logical in and of itself? Or can it only be logical when you compare it with something else which is illogical? Well, how can you know if something is logical when you have never encountered something illogical in your life? You need to know the difference in order to know how logic works. So let's ask the question again. Can something be logical in and of itself, or can it only be logical when you compare it with something else which is illogical? The answer is that you need to know the difference between logic and illogic in order to understand both. So something cannot be logical in and of itself, but it also can't be illogical in and of itself. It is impossible to describe something in and of itself. We can only describe something in relationship with something else that is different. So we can't describe something in and of itself as logical, nor can we describe it as illogical. We can only describe it as logical or illogical when we put it next to something which is not itself. But when we isolate things and we try to understand things in and of themselves, it becomes impossible to describe them. And realize that everything in reality is essentially itself. Everything is essentially itself. Everything is, in and of itself. My voice is itself. It's not something else. My hand is itself. A water droplet is itself, etc. Everything is itself, and therefore everything is indescribable. But it becomes describable when we start to compare everything with everything else. Alright? That should do it. That's enough explanation for now. I might be wrong about this, but to me it seems to make a lot of sense. Time and time again, I stumble upon the same conclusion that the absolute truth is essentially non-dual and infinitely paradoxical. You can't describe it. But to say that it is indescribable is itself a description. So it's neither describable nor indescribable. Anyway, thanks for listening. Till next time.